there something you always wanted to do? So I sketched this on a napkin and said, yeah, I always wanted to do the piece that I did in Albany, the Granite Sun, which we changed to Granite Windmill. But I always wanted to do it in black granite and change the pallets that go around into straight instead of like pallets of a windmill. And he said, oh great, do it. You know, so he commissioned me to do this $100,000 piece when he had just lost the hotel to Texas to cheer him up.
Next, please. Okay, and had you done many fountains at this point, or is this one of the first fountains you did?
I did, my first piece was a fountain, and I've done a lot of fountains. I actually stopped making fountains for a long time because I didn't want to be known as the water guy, you know, so, but I'm back to doing them now.
Okay, let's keep going. And of course, this is a very important work because one of the works at Sama was more or less inspired by this work. So this was the earlier steles, the mountain steles, and I know the setting played a big part in your decision-making process. So tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, this is in northern Arizona, north of Scottsdale, and these steles, which means to me is a monolithic stone with writing on it. Usually the pharaohs would put, I'm the king, I'm the greatest, and it's propaganda mostly. And so to me, my carving is my writing, and so these are, the tall one is 30 feet tall, and it has mirror polished stainless. And what I really liked about it was that all the three pieces are facing in different directions. And so anytime you walked up to it, you would see the stainless steel, but you would see the reflection behind you. So if it was sunset, it would be dark behind it and it'd be red in the middle or yellow. And so it was really kind of a striking thing. And I put it on top of a little hill, and like the one that's here. It's on the river, and you look up at it from down in the river, so it kind of has the same feeling as this.
And was this the first time you used stainless steel in one of these outdoors pieces? Because what it does, it of course incorporates the sky into the work.
My very first sculpture was granite and stainless steel, which was called Fountain. So it was just a return to that material.
Okay. Next one. And this is also in Arizona. And now here, of course, this was conceived, as we were talking about, as a conversation of different components. Is that correct?
Right. This was actually an exhibition that I traveled around the country. I first created this inside of a gallery in Houston and took it to New York, to Chicago, to Los Angeles, and then ended up in the desert. I took it downtown Houston also at Allen Center. And every time it went somewhere, it changed, you know. And so this is actually an entrance going to Pinnacle Peak, and so it was. It depending on the room, it would just slide in and out. The slabs are 3-inch thick, 2,000-pound pieces that we would put on semis and take all over the place.
Okay, let's go to the next. All right, now this is, of course, one of the really major public artworks that you've done, and it's from 1992. Tell us how it came about. Tell us about the structure. I think there's probably some meaning in the structure that you want to tell us about as well.
This structure, well, to back up a little bit, Houston was building a memorial for the fallen police officers, and they were doing a national search, and on the committee was Mrs. DeManel and Peter Marzio, the director of the Fine Arts Museum in Houston. And they called me up and they said, you should submit something for this, and they took me out and showed me the place, and I liked the place and everything, but I didn't come back to them for a year. I went to Italy and looked around in Spain and looked at why places are important, what makes people come to places. And then I came back after a year and I said, I decided what I want to do. And I told them, and I didn't know if they already had picked someone or not. You know, I just, and I said, my idea is that I want to act like I'm the Jolly Green Giant, and and I'm a carver, so I'm going to dig my hands into the ground, the earth, and dig these holes, and then take what I've dug out and make a mound out of it. And then I want to go down in these holes, and so I made the terraces going down, and then I made some stairs going up in the mound that I made. So actually this was just created by displacing the earth, but not bringing anything to the place. And so there's this ziggurat shape is the earliest pyramids in the world, or ziggurat step pyramids. But the difference is that this is the only pyramid in the world that is actually growing out of the ground. And I tell everyone that, you know, you come up with new ideas not because you're copying something, it's because you're doing something, you know, from scratch. You know, you're throwing, you know, so by digging in the ground and doing that, it's also a maze. So you can see the stairs. They don't go straight up. You have to go in and around and kind of find your way like life. And at the top is a fountain with the inscription of all the names that is reflected in the water. So it's, again, they wanted to put railings all the way around this thing, and we were able to talk them out of that because it's a piece of art, and as far as I know, no one's gotten hurt.
Next. Rockport Beach installation, so this is close to home. You tell us about the forms, and similar story with the last one, and similar approach.
Again, this is just, I drove up on the beach and had my truck and my crane and just dumped these off on the beach and took a picture, and the park people came over and said, "What are you doing?" I says, "I'm just playing with the rocks." And they said, "Well, you can't do that." And I said, "Okay, I'm going." And so I got this picture. It's in my town, Rockport, but it's just for the, you know, I put the things out. And
so this was a temporary site-specific installation.
Very temporary.
Very cool, too. Okay, let's go to the next. Okay, you're back to interlocking forms. Any story about how you ended up doing this for the Jones Museum in Oklahoma?
This piece is it's Oklahoma granite to begin with, so I always like to use, when possible, the granite from the area, so this is Oklahoma granite from Granite, Oklahoma, and I had that exhibition of all of the floor, the granite landscape, in this museum, but the exhibition space was down in the basement, which was a big gallery, and the only way to get them down there was the pieces in an elevator. So, which turned out to be a big job, but and they thought it wasn't possible. But I took the top off of the elevator, and we were able to put a crane in there and hoist them up and stand the pieces up, and then go down and then let them back down. And each piece, so that whole show went down in the basement of this museum.
Next. Okay, why don't you just continue?
Let's see, by order, well, I guess they're both, it was a big year, I guess, 95. The Woodlands on the left, 3 pieces, the tallest one, about 30 feet tall. The one on the right is Dallas Morning News in downtown Dallas, and just some commissions that I was able to do.
And of course you've been, these are hybrids in the sense of some of your earlier works. The one on the left reminds me of the Botanical Garden work, only taller. And then the one on the right, of course, goes back to the early window. Yes, let's go to the next, please. Okay, this is great because we've talked about this conversation and now you've got them in a chessboard configuration. What led to this? Again,
remember when I said I hate pedestals. If I were to have an exhibition with all these small pieces, the pedestals would be bigger than the sculptures. So what I do is I create these little environments where I'm able to imagine like this is a plaza. And so eventually some of these things grow up to be monumental art in a plaza. But if I had, you know, that many pedestals, it would just be overwhelming. So it's just a way of showing art.
And I'm just curious, those were individual sculptures but presented in the chessboard, and so some of them were maybe purchased and thus the configuration would never exist again?
they're all so old.
Yeah. So if you have another retrospective, you can only show them that way if you had everybody participating.
We do try to keep track of where.
Well, your book is a great documentation, and we have this book in the museum store too, by the way, if you should have an interest in that. Let's go to the next. Okay, now you're doing some kind of like lattice work configuration on the left.
Yes, the granite weaving. I started weaving granite, and so actually that's two weavings put together, but actually when you weave the granite, they go together, and when you put the last piece in, it's just locked into place, so like fabric, you know.
How do you do that? How do you weave granite?
You soak it a long time, you know. So.
Okay, let's keep moving. You've seen lap straight before and the base form before. Let's go to the next. Okay, and then this is again your favorite, Fredericksburg in Wichita, Kansas, and tell us about this project.
This museum is known for their outdoor sculpture collection, and right where in the first photograph was a knoll going down a hill right in front of this museum, which has one of the largest Moroles in front of it. And over on the left side of that Morole was a big triangle that you went up 2 flights of stairs to go in the museum. And they had $60,000. They said, we would like one of your sculptures in front of the museum. And I said, well, no problem. I can have something here tomorrow. But God, that's such an important place in front of you. Your museum seems like it should have something else. And they said, well, I said, well, can I come up with something else? And they said, sure, but we only have $60,000. And I said, no problem. You know, so I went back and I designed a 4-level sculpture garden for the front of the museum. And they liked the idea, and they raised $3 million. The first thing I did was I put a wall in front of the stairs and put one of my sculptures. And then if you look up there where the glass is on the right, that's the stairs were behind that. And so when you come out of the front door, what used to be the front door, you're in that private garden up there where you could have a fiberglass Oldenburg or something like that, which they did have. And it would be protected because it'd be on the museum grounds. But and then you could look down on this water wall. Where under the Morole, there were windows, but no door. So I made the front door go under the museum. So they had to change the first floor to the entrance and change the whole museum around. But they liked it because it created all this land that they otherwise was unused. And so I created this intermediate area here with a benches and the water wall, and also the windows for the handicapped to look through. First thing I do in public projects is think of the handicapped, because I'll be there soon. So, so the glass so you can look through, and they said there wasn't any room for a handicap ramp. Well, it's there, you know. So don't ever believe what they say.
Okay, let's keep moving. Okay, another installation, this time indoors. We haven't seen any suspended forms yet, so tell us about this one.
This is in Oklahoma. It's a medical research foundation. They study the AIDS virus here. Anybody that studies the AIDS virus, they get it from this hospital, this research center, and they all study the same one. And when I looked at the space was already there, these big windows, and it's on a highway. It reminded me of Tiffany's in New York, and going to look at the windows in Tiffany's in Christmas, you know, and look at all the different jewelry hanging in the windows. And I said, you know, I want to do like a Tiffany's and hang the sculpture so when the people go through, they look in this gem kind of atmosphere. And so that's where the concept came from. So the polka dotted piece is what penicillin looks like when you look through a microscope. The second one from the right is mitosis, splitting of a cell, and the floor has double helixes and things. So, and then there's benches around the outside, and then there's benches outside looking in also.
Beautiful installation. Let's go to the next. And this one's in China. How did that come about?
I was invited to speak at the sculpture conference in Rhode Island about 18 years ago, and the next speakers after me were Chinese delegation that came over, and they saw my lecture, and they came up to me and they said, "We want to do something with you." I said, "Yeah, I've heard that before." And so, but sure enough, they went back and they said, "Okay, come on over." About a month later, and I said, "Wait a minute, I'm booked, but invite me for next year, and I'll make some time." And so they did. And so I've been working in China for about 18 years, and we just finished our largest project ever in Shanghai, and it's not even dedicated yet. But this is in between the time, and this is where the summer palace of Beijing, where the emperor would go, and this is a sun fountain, like the Mecum piece, standing up, just turned laying down and becoming a fountain. And the water comes up and comes down.
Next image. And this is really interesting because you used some different materials here to create an indoor space that I guess is a living space, correct?
This is kind of a living space. It's a house, 35,000 square foot house on the beach between Newport and Laguna Beach, and on the water. And the people, kind of eccentric people, they created their hometown in the basement. 35,000 square feet is just gigantic. And that's the same granite that I tell you is my favorite. So they asked me, what would I do? I came to this place and they had roughed it out, and they had a platform there in the middle of this spiral staircase. And you're looking at just the tip of the iceberg. 10 times that much is underneath the floor there. So that's just the top of it. So I saw this and I saw the water, and right next to the stairs was a roll of black tar paper because they were constructing the place. So I grabbed that roll of tar paper and I jumped on that island and I unrolled the paper and it fell down the stairs. And I said what I would do would be create like a seashell, that you found a seashell on the beach, gigantic, and you built a house around it. And they said, okay. And I said, oh my God. And then it took me 3 years to do. And then next to it, they had a fireplace, a regular fireplace. And I said, well, that's not going to do. I got to do that fireplace too. So I ended up doing that fireplace, which is unusual because it's like 250 slabs of granite that are laminated together to create that fireplace, because the chimney has to go through the middle of it.
Next. Okay, so now weaving on much larger scale, it's obviously more difficult on this scale to weave, or no? Tell us about that.
Well, 30,000 pounds. I had never done that big of a piece, and I did one for the Olympics in China, and I had a little bit of experience, and so it was much more challenging, and I had to actually create some new tools to actually lift it up, because the pressure of it could break it, lifting it. So because it's never been done before, you kind of are trying it out, as you know, so you want to be as safe as possible. So, but this is the Latino Cultural Center, and I was the opening exhibition at the new Legarreta designed building in Dallas 15 years ago, and then 10 years ago they asked me to do the 10th anniversary, and so this was one of the pieces in front of the museum for their opening.
Next. Here.
Okay, this is Texas Tech University, where I created this 94-ton piece on the left, a lap strake like the piece in New York, but you can walk through it. So like again, I did that lap strake in New York, but I kept wondering, what if I could walk through it, you know? So I was able to do it for the university. And that the 35-foot wide piece, you can drive a fire truck through that on the campus, and it's kind of a sunset almost.
Next. These are two views at nighttime and during the daytime of Spirit Waves Fountain, and where is that located?
This is in Houston. The people had bought one of my hanging arrowheads, and I created a hidden garden and on Memorial on the bayou. And then they bought the house behind them, and they made a bridge over to the other house for guests. and they wanted a sacred space, and they were head of the Save the Oceans. So I made a wave bench, and then a wave fountain, and then the floor is actually in the shape of a nautilus, so it's spiral. And so the water just comes down and disappears around the floor.
Next. Another plaza, and I think we're just going to keep moving, and let's go to the next one. Same place, maybe talk about it from this view.
Well, the prior one is the law school at University of Arkansas, and that the prior one was Sandra Day O'Connor did the soft opening, and then Bill Clinton came and did the actual opening, and so that was kind of fun. And this is at a sunken garden in University of OSU in Tulsa, and it's a water wall. That whole and there's water coming out of the stones, and so it's an environment.
And the next, here we are, back at Sama. Okay, now this is a really interesting project because when I first arrived here in 2006, this still had not been completed, and it was probably one of the very first things I was asked to basically put on track. And so I had the great pleasure of getting in touch with Jesus and telling him we were finally gonna realize this project that was originally started in 1990. So there was a huge time gap there, and it went through a lot of manifestations and changes in terms of the idea for what it was and where it would be. And it started actually with the little piece on the top. So I'm going to turn it over to you to tell the rest of the story. Tell us about the piece on the top and then how everything else happened.
The top piece with a cross on it was a fountain, and I sold it to Ann Bowman and her husband, who invented the computer chip, and he passed away, and she moved back to California, and so she donated it to the museum here, and it kind of kicked around the museum because it was kind of a little bit too small for the big areas around the museum, and finally. They wanted to do something with it, and I said, they said it was too small, and I said, all you have to do is add money and I can make it bigger, no problem. And so they did allow me. They found some generous people, and so I just did the police memorial thing, the step pyramid, but a round one, the ziggurat. So this is a round ziggurat. And the fun thing about this is that the pump and everything is inside of the piece. So you actually remove a step and you go inside of it, and so the water comes out of the middle, and so it's kind of and so we were able to put it right outside the museum. I hope you get to go by and see it. It's right outside on this side of the wall.
And let's keep moving. And this was a real significant moment in your life, and your parents were there to share it with you, so why don't you tell us about it?
The last thing the president, George Bush, did before he left office was to award the National Medal of the Arts, the highest honor in the nation, to me, the youngest person to ever receive the medal. And so here I am receiving it, and the best thing was that my parents were able to go, and so it was kind of an amazing thing.
Yeah. Congratulations. And let's go to the next. And then this, of course, also now lives at Sama, and you tell us from your perspective then how this happened.
The piece was commissioned by Atwells, Billy and Wendy Atwell, the Atwells, and loaned them to the museum, and we were able to install them probably a couple of years ago, and just this last.
I want to add, we installed them just specifically for the opening of the river landing. I mean, remember, you came here, and that was our goal, was to have it ready for when they launched the museum reach of the Riverwalk. And of course, we met that goal beautifully, thanks to you.
And is it true that it was just...
Oh, and yes, and then of course, just Last month, the donors who loaned it to us, the Atwell family, decided to make it a permanent gift. So it was approved by the board, and it is now part of the San Antonio Museum of Art's collection, and we're very proud to have two major Moroles, very long-lasting works of public art on our campus. So we're the only place that has like bookends, the Moroles at the bookends of the campus. Let's go to the next. Tell us about this.
This is the project that this is under construction. This is in Shanghai. The column is 50 feet high, 9-foot diameter granite column, a fountain. The water runs down this river. I've moved these trees over, all the trees that are about 10 of those trees over.